couple other things and go to that.
You're watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Well, good morning to you, and welcome into Fox 35 News Plus. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday morning, live on Fox Local, fox35orlando.com, and on YouTube. We appreciate you joining us today. Got a lot to come here in this next hour. Coming up later, we're going to be talking with an expert about the impact of the Trump tariffs. You see a live look at the stock market right here, right now. It opened this morning and promptly dropped. You see a lot of red there in the opening hours of the stock market today, following Trump's announcement yesterday afternoon of sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. New Congress members from Florida, Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine, spoke on the U.S. House floor yesterday evening after being sworn in. We will have that for you. But we begin today with a look at the 2025 hurricane season forecast. This is from Colorado State University, where they release what they predict for the upcoming season. And we are standing by for a live stream as they talk about those predictions. We do have the details of that forecast for you right now on fox35orlando.com. And we will dip into that prediction, that forecast, as they take us through that here in just a little bit. But I want to go ahead and check in with Fox 35 Storm Team meteorologist Brooks Garner to kind of set this all up for us here. Brooks, I know this is something that we keep a close eye on every year. If you could just kind of talk us through, first of all, last year's predictions and kind of how that compared to what we actually saw when it came to the hurricane season.
Absolutely, Garrett. I'm referencing the numbers right now. So last year, Colorado State University was very accurate in the scheme of seasonal forecasts. They were dead on. They had a greater than 84% accuracy. Now, Colorado State University has been forecasting hurricane seasons for the last 40 years. And this season, they're forecasting an above average season. It's going to be above normal season with a lot of activity. So we're expecting that. We've got heavy weight into this venerable organization. A lot of folks say, well, why Colorado State? Why isn't it Florida State? Well, the meteorologist that started the program, who's now passed away, Dr. William Gray, passed away a few years ago, was stationed in the military as a meteorologist as a young man in the Azores of the Eastern Atlantic. And from there, he studied tropical waves and hurricanes at a time when nobody had really gone into the deep dive in how the water temperatures and various atmospheric processes can affect how many hurricanes form during a season. Now, when he left the military, he became a professor and happened to get a job in Colorado. And he continued his studies in academia there in Colorado. So that's why Colorado State, being landlocked in the Rocky Mountains, is a hub for tropical meteorology. It has everything to do with the guy who started it. Today, it's being led by the likes of Dr. Philip Klotzbach. He's their main spokesperson now. He's today's Dr. Gray, if you will. And he was live in South Padre, Texas. You'll see perhaps later on in this program, we'll dip into the feed. There's a National Tropical Weather Conference that happens annually there every season during this week, and that's where he presents his first seasonal forecast. And indeed, they are going for a busier than normal season. Now, last season, they forecast 23 named storms. Typically, we see 14. We ultimately got 18. As far as hurricanes go, we typically see 7. They were forecasting 12. We got 11. So that was a really good forecast. Typically, we get 3 major hurricanes, category 3 or higher, winds of greater than 111 miles an hour. Typically, we see 3 of those. They were forecasting 6, and we got 5 of them. So again, an 84% accuracy. Now, this year, they're forecasting 17 named storms. So fewer named storms than last year's forecast, but still 3 more than normal. As far as hurricanes go, we typically see 7. They're forecasting 9. And as far as major hurricanes go, typically we see 3, and they're forecasting 4. So it's not going to be a huge hyperactive season as we've seen in years past. However, there are important considerations for here in Florida, and that is the current state. This is where it gets into the deep dive, but follow me here. The current state of the El Niño Southern Oscillation. That is the water temperature off of Ecuador, the equatorial waters in the Eastern Pacific. It's called the ENSO, or the El Niño Southern Oscillation. And as you probably heard of El Niño, and you've heard of La Niña, El Niño is when it's warmer than normal, and La Niña is when it's colder than normal. When it's a La Niña, when it's a La Nina forecast, that typically gives you a hyperactive season. When it's a neutral forecast, that typically gives you kind of a closer to normal season. And when it's a El Nino, that's when it's a slower than normal season. All has to do with the trade winds. It gets windier, rips apart the hurricanes. So this year, neutral, kind of a typical amount of hurricanes, skewing slightly above normal because of an unusually warm Atlantic Ocean. And so that's why it's going to be at or above normal. Okay, so the important thing for us isn't how many form, it's where they go. You could have the slowest hurricane season where there's one hurricane the whole season. That would be incredibly unlikely, but you could have one hurricane the whole season. But if it hits us, well, for us, that would be like the worst hurricane season in memory, potentially, right? So with an ENSO neutral, an El Nino Southern Oscillation in the neutral phase, typically we see a lot of the storms born in the Atlantic coming a lot closer to Florida or even making a landfall or heading up to the Outer Banks. And Gulf systems will typically come into Florida instead of heading up into Texas or Louisiana. So, Garrett, there's a lot of, they call them teleconnections, things outside of the immediate forecast area that we have to watch carefully to determine not just how many there will be, but where they go.
And does this forecast, this kind of initial look at the hurricane season, kind of walks through potential landfall percentages and those kinds of things as well?
It does. And typically, Florida will see about a 21% chance of a landfall in any given season. This year, the forecast is for a 26% chance. So it's about a 5% higher chance. Pretty conservative forecast. But that is a nod to that ENSO neutral period, that El Nino Southern Oscillation neutral period where the water temperatures over there in the eastern equatorial Pacific are where they should be for this time of year, but that tends to steer hurricanes closer to Florida. So it's a little bit of a nod. Now, as far as the East Coast goes, it'll be, I believe, about a 10% higher chance, like a 67% chance that it's somewhere along the Atlantic coast from Cape Cod all the way down to Florida, there could be a landfalling hurricane. So with a season featuring more hurricanes than we typically see, well, there's more chances for a landfall, whether that happens somewhere in the Caribbean or happens here in the U.S. So, yeah, I think the takeaway here, more so than even the number of systems, is that their forecast is that we go from the current La Nina, where it's colder than normal out there in the Pacific, a pattern that would typically go as a really hyperactive season, is going to transition into the neutral phase, which will tend to tamp down that activity a little bit, but steer whatever forms potentially closer to Florida.
And why does this forecast matter? Why is this one that we watch so closely?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, this is used primarily for, number one, residents along the coast to weigh their risks that year, but also for emergency managers to plan accordingly. If there's a higher than normal chance of a hurricane hitting Florida, emergency management planners can align their forces and shift if they need to, sort of pivot to be prepared when the inevitable happens. It's also important for supply chain operations, whether it's hardware stores supplying plywood or relief efforts. If there's a busier than normal season forecast and a forecast with a higher than normal chance that they'll actually hit us, they'll realign that supply chain to accommodate. And finally, for the insurance industry, because obviously when you're weighing risks as an insurer, you need to make decisions that have to do with policies and even the reinsurance industry. You know, when the insurance industry gets hit with big claims, like if a big hurricane hits Florida, there's a reinsurance industry that actually gives money to those insurance companies. So it's this like big circle of risk management and weighing the risks. So that was the original motivation 40 years ago for Colorado State to issue these. There was a little bit of a cowboy mentality of like, let's see if we can forecast hurricanes for the season, knowing what we know. And then kind of the rest followed naturally, where people were like, okay, these are pretty accurate forecasts. We can actually use them, not just to plan for residents, but also to plan for insurance. Since then, Garrett, there have been a dozen or more major organizations, including the National Weather Service, that issue their own hurricane seasonal forecasts. So we'll see a lot of those coming out. They range from private weather organizations like AccuWeather to federal forecasters like the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. So everybody, I don't want to say is jumping on the bandwagon, but they've also followed that climate science, and they have come up with their own algorithms to make a forecast. And of course, everybody has their own motivation. A lot of it's bragging rights, but one of the more venerable and more established, and one carrying really the most weight, is this Colorado State University outlook, which is why we watch it so carefully here.
Yeah, and like you said, last year they were pretty spot on.
They were 84.4% accuracy, which in the scheme of a 6-month forecast period is incredible. There's a famous quote saying, a forecast is tough to make, especially when it involves the future. A forecast is tough to make, especially when it involves the future. Forecasts are very difficult. Things can change. If this La Niña doesn't transition into a neutral ENSO, that would have huge implications on the steering currents and on the total storm count. If it transitions even further and goes from colder than normal to then warmer than normal, like in El Niño, which would be very unlikely, we would have a lower storm count and likely a much slower season, which would be wonderful. But unfortunately, this year it looks like we're going to be in that neutral zone, which would tend to steer storms, at least historically, close to our area.
Yeah.
Garrett, I did a whole breakdown with graphics on my Facebook and my
Great.
Twitter pages, my X page. Just look for Brooks Weather. I've got the maps. Academic at Florida State University compiled all of the landfalling hurricanes during El Niño, La Niña, and neutral years here in Florida. So you can just take a quick gander and see how definitive those trends really are.
All right. Brooks, I appreciate that. We appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus to break all that down for us. We're going to take a break here on Fox 35 News Plus, but we'll be right back.
You're watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Welcome back into Fox 35 News Plus. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday morning, live on fox35orlando.com, Fox Local, and on YouTube as well. Been a busy day so far. We talked about the hurricane forecast. We hope to have a little bit more on that later in the show as well. But we want to shift gears here a little bit because we know this afternoon the state attorney in the 5th Judicial Circuit of Florida is expected to give an update on the case against the couple that's accused in the death of 10-year-old Xavier Williams. He's the 10-year-old boy in Tavares who investigators say was abused by his mother and her boyfriend, Andre Walker and Kimberly Mills. There is a news conference scheduled for this afternoon, and Fox 35's Morgan Parrish gives us the latest details on where the case stands ahead of this announcement this afternoon.
Good morning. Yeah, so we're expecting an update on this case later on this afternoon here at the courthouse. But both Kimberly Mills and her boyfriend, Andre Walker, they are charged with second-degree murder. We know earlier this week they waived their arraignment. But the couple, like you said, they're accused of torturing and ultimately killing Kimberly Mills' 10-year-old son, Xavier Williams. Tavares police say the couple would tape the boy to a ladder and drop weights on his stomach as punishment. And family members say Xavier's father had no idea about the alleged abuse and claims Mills tried to limit contact before the boy's death. And we spoke with Xavier's aunt, Camille Williams, and she says they really can't understand exactly what happened.
Whatever punishment God sees fit, as long as they don't get away with it.
And both remain in jail on no bond. Again, we are expecting an update from the state attorney's office this afternoon during a press conference. That's going to be at 2:30 here at the courthouse. Of course, we'll have a team here and we'll continue to bring you the latest details as soon as we get an update.
And we will stream that news conference live at 2:30 here on Fox Local and on YouTube. That's going to be in the middle of our Florida Live program that streams. So we will take that live. Here, we will have that update for you later today. We will expect to hear from the prosecutor and from the police chief in Tavares as well. Also in Lake County, 3 women are dead, a 4th in critical condition after a tragic car crash over the weekend there. The Florida Highway Patrol also says one of the women in the car posted a video drinking inside the car while speeding moments before that deadly crash. Fox 35's Randy Hildreth spoke to the mother of the survivor in this crash yesterday.
The only survivor of that crash is recovering here at the hospital. Now, I do want to warn you, the video that you are about to see may not be appropriate for younger viewers. Florida Highway Patrol confirmed it is using this video as part of their investigation, and one of the people that you will see is one of the people who was killed. Speeds appearing to top 100 miles per hour, and alcohol passed around the vehicle. Florida Highway Patrol says this video is now part of their investigation into this weekend's deadly crash in Lake County.
In that vehicle, if the video ends up being exactly what our investigators are able to prove, there was a lot of distraction in that car for the driver and for the other passengers.
Troopers say the crash happened early Sunday morning along State Road 19 just south of St. Florian Lane. Investigators say the driver failed to negotiate a curve, ran off the road, hit a pole, and flipped several times. They say no one was wearing a seatbelt and everyone was thrown from the Jeep. 3 people were killed: Kenesha Lewis, Octavia Pugh, and Shakayla Mathis. A 4th passenger, Mariah Belcher, is in the hospital.
My child is here, but it's 3 kids that lost their lives behind this. And I want their family to go through their grieving and not have to worry about my baby.
Mariah's mom says her daughter is still in critical condition but stable. She has a traumatic brain injury, fractured vertebrae in her neck, and suffered a spleen injury.
My whole ride from Alabama, all I could say is my child should live and not die. And she's fighting.
Marcia Knight says her daughter and her friends may have been leaving a party when they allegedly made the post on social media and crashed. She says it's hard watching that video and knowing a night of fun with friends ended like this.
The accountability on my half goes towards my daughter. Because if you knew this person had been drinking, you knew you guys were drinking before, there, after, why? You know what I'm saying? You know better.
FHP says they're still waiting on toxicology reports in this investigation. They also have to compare data from the vehicle to how fast the vehicle was recorded in that video. Investigators are also reminding you to wear your seatbelt. A GoFundMe created for one of the victims, Kenesha Lewis, described her as a mother of 5 who was sweet and loving. Another GoFundMe created by the family of Octavia Pugh says that they are heartbroken by this loss, and the entire community is heartbroken. The mayor of Eustis posted on his Facebook page that there will be a prayer vigil this weekend at Carver Park on Sunday at 5. Reporting tonight, Randy Hill.
And so that was Randy's story. Showing the video that FHP is using as part of their investigation. A controversial connector road has been proposed to link the 417 and the Orlando Sanford International Airport. Discussion continued over that. in a public meeting yesterday afternoon. And we know there's been pushback from a number of neighbors in that area who say they don't want that road carved through their backyards. Fox 35's Amanda McKenzie has the details.
That is a concern for some. The goal is to get drivers off of neighborhood streets and reduce congestion. Right now, there are 2 proposed connector roads on the table. The Central Florida Expressway Authority says it is trying to balance the impacts to residents with the needs of a growing Central Florida. The Flying Fox Fruits Nursery sits along the path of the proposed route. The owner says he is worried the state will seize his property through eminent domain to build the road.
You know, they've got 2 alignments left, and one just grazes my property, which would, I believe, interfere with the climate here and the drainage. But then they have the newest proposed alignment 2A, which comes right through.
Enhanced connectivity is good for business and tourism, and our airport is growing, and connections are important.
The Central Florida Expressway Authority will host another public hearing in July where they will also present a final pathway for the proposed road and get more input from the community.
We're going to take a break here on Fox 35 News Plus, but we'll be right back.
You're watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Welcome into Fox 35 News Plus. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us on this Thursday morning. The stock market plunged this morning when it opened after President Trump yesterday announcing some sweeping tariffs on foreign goods. So what are the impacts going to be? What will we feel? What will the economy feel when it comes to these tariffs that are now in effect, went into effect at midnight after Trump signed them yesterday in a ceremony at the Rose Garden? Well, earlier today, just a little bit ago, actually, I spoke with Francisco Sanchez. He's the former U.S. Undersecretary of Commerce for Trade. We talked about the impact of these tariffs.
Garrett, first of all, it's good to be with you, and it is sweeping. This is the biggest change to trade policy, and I'd say international economic policy, in probably 100 years for the United States. So it is sweeping. It is very significant.
We saw this morning when the stock market opened up, it really took a dive. I would imagine that response to this does not surprise you.
Well, it doesn't. One of the things that business looks for after making money is certainty. And this creates a lot of uncertainty in the business community, particularly manufacturing companies that have international supply chains. So, yeah, it did not surprise me because of the uncertainty that a lot of businesses are going to face, certainly at least in the short term.
So what happens now for many of these businesses?
Well, they have decisions to make. Some of them, the larger companies, a Walmart, for example, has the buying power to tell its overseas suppliers that they have to absorb the cost of these tariffs. But that's the exception to the rule, I believe. Not every company has the buying power of a Walmart. And I don't know that Walmart can sustain that over time, but certainly in the near term, a large company like Walmart can probably tell many of its overseas suppliers that they're going to need to absorb these costs. For many other businesses, they will either have to increase their prices to cover manufacturing costs, or look for alternative supply chains, preferably within the U.S. I don't think that's something that most businesses will be able to do in the near term, but over time, that may be a preferred solution to raising prices, is to tweak their supply chains to try to minimize the impact of the tariffs.
And that certainly seems like that's what the president is wanting to see from all of this. But how you kind of touched on it there. It sounds like there could be some pain for consumers for a while.
Well, the supply chains have generally been in place for a while for many of these companies, and in many cases, there may not be readily available inputs. For example, if you're a manufacturer in the United States and part of your supply chain comes from overseas, it may come because it's cheaper to buy overseas, but it could also be that there's just not sufficient supply or any supply of a particular input for the United States. So to the extent that you're going to seek to try to integrate your supply chain entirely or primarily within the United States, it's going to take time. It's not something that you can do overnight.
We keep hearing about the historic nature of this. You have a lot of experience in this area. Have you ever seen anything like this?
Not in my lifetime. The last time that the United States had this kind of a significant tariff increase was in the 20s under the Smoot-Hawley Act. And the president's tariffs are actually even larger than those. So no, certainly not in my lifetime. And I'd say nearly 100 years, we have not seen this significant a change in trade policy.
So where do things go from here, do you think?
Well, I believe that the president is going to pay close attention to how American businesses are responding. How is this impacting them? I think at some point, if it seems to be working for his objectives, and I think it's worth touching on what the president is hoping to achieve with this. One is he wants, to the extent possible, if you're selling in the United States, he wants you to make the products you're selling in the United States. So if he sees a trend toward that, I think he's going to stick to his guns. If he sees that this is detrimental to the economy over a sustained period, he's probably going to receive a lot of pressure to, if not reconsider, at least pull back a bit. Certainly on critical inputs to continue to maintain manufacturing. I think we have to wait and see what kind of reaction countries give. If there's a retaliatory response where other countries are increasing their tariffs on U.S. goods, that'll certainly have an adverse impact and could very well also cause the U.S. government to evaluate if they should stay on the track. But I'd say in the near term, I would not expect any big changes. We're probably talking over the next 6 to 12 months that before the president reconsiders, if at all.
You know, the president has vowed a couple of things to reduce the reliance on foreign goods, but he has also pledged to lower prices on things. Are both of those objectives possible at the same time when we're seeing this tariff policy?
Well, Garrett, as I mentioned, a lot of U.S. manufacturing is reliant on an international supply chain. That is to say that in order to build or manufacture the goods that they make, they rely, at least in part, on products that come from overseas. If those products have a tariff imposed on them, they're going to increase the cost of production and ultimately the end cost of their final product. So I'd say in the near term and medium term, that's going to be hard to achieve. It's certainly in the manufacturing side. Perhaps over time, if the president's objective is met by bringing more manufacturing back to the United States, it could potentially bring prices down, but that's not a guarantee. Labor costs here and other related costs are such that it's not certain that bringing manufacturing here across sectors would necessarily bring prices down.
We're going to take a break here on Fox 35 News Plus, but we will be right back after this.
You're watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Welcome back into Fox 35 News Plus. I'm Garrett Wymer, and thanks for joining us. So we want to play for you a little bit from this live stream of the Colorado State University hurricane season forecast. There were some issues with the live stream, so we're going to go back a little bit and play for you as Phil Klotzbach kind of walks us through what that forecast is. So let's go ahead and listen in from moments ago here.
They only make up about a quarter of 20 to 25% of all the storms, and in a year they do about 80 to 85% of the damage. We also forecast accumulated cyclone energy. That's an integrated hurricane wind energy metric that accounts for storm basically longevity and intensity. If you're a baseball fan, it's kind of like the OPS of hurricanes. I'll be sure to throw in a few baseball references throughout this talk. My mentor, Dr. Bill Gray, who some of you had who some of you may have met a few times. I was a huge baseball fan. I'll mention Dr. Gray quite a bit throughout this presentation as well. A new metric we started forecasting a couple of years ago is the accumulated cyclone energy in the western half of the Atlantic basin. Why we focus on that separately from the basin is because that's where people live, that's where property is, and obviously then you're getting more closely tied to impacts, which is what, if you were here yesterday and you heard Ryan talk, what he was focusing on some with his presentation yesterday. So when it comes to seasonal forecasting, though, a lot of people say this is how we do it. And actually, this cartoon, which was 2007, is perfect. See, verily, we see 17 named storms. So this is Dr. Gray, again, my mentor. That's not how we do these seasonal forecasting. I do tell I've told people that, my mom, when I was born, said, hey, look, this guy's going to be a meteorologist. He's going to be a forecaster, so we're going to name him Phil after the groundhog. That's not how we do our seasonal forecasts. We use a lot of weather and climate data and historical information to come up with these forecasts. We also now use a lot of model forecast data that today Dr. Gray wouldn't have had available to him when he started doing these forecasts back in the early 1980s. So this can be summarized in a couple of quotes from the legendary Yogi Berra. First of all, it is tough to make predictions, especially about the future. I think a few people have said that, and Ryan said, attributed it to Niels Bohr. So, forecasting the future is hard, right? Whether you're forecasting weather, whether you're forecasting sporting events, political races, all that stuff, it's hard. But we also find that you can see a lot by looking. Basically, by going back into the past, there are clues in the atmosphere-ocean system that can tip us off as to whether the current hurricane season is going to have above or below normal activity. There are these precursor signals. I'm going to try to convince you of that in this next plot. And here what we're looking at is June and July, so basically right prior to when the season really ramps up. In busy seasons minus quiet seasons. And this was the way Dr. Gray used to always say, if there's any signal, you basically take the top 10, difference the bottom 10, and if there's no signal, then basically it's just not really predictable. But there are kind of coherent spatial patterns in these sea surface temperatures. So in busier seasons, we tend to have a warmer tropical Atlantic. Makes sense, its hurricanes live off of that warm ocean water. If we look in the tropical Pacific, we see cold water in the eastern and central part of the Pacific, warm water in the western Pacific. That's kind of your canonical La Niña-like pattern. And so Dr. Gray, when he was starting doing this research on seasonal hurricane prediction, he was teaching a tropical meteorology class, and this is long before the day and age of Wikipedia. This is back in the good old Encyclopedia Britannica days, but he knew which years were busy hurricane seasons. He knew which years had El Niño conditions, and he said, hey, when we have El Niño conditions in the eastern and central tropical Pacific, we tend to get fewer hurricanes in the Atlantic. And so the question then became, well, why would something going on in the Pacific Ocean impact hurricanes in the Atlantic Ocean thousands of miles away? So obviously, I'm sure most of you are very familiar with El Niño and La Niña. El Niño is warmer than normal water in the eastern and central tropical Pacific. La Niña basically colder than normal water in that same region. And why that matters is because of what it does to the thunderstorm activity across the Pacific Ocean. So in a La Niña, or kind of the average pattern, is that you get your strongest thunderstorms near Indonesia, where the waters in the Pacific Ocean are the warmest. In an El Niño, those water temperatures get warm farther to the east, so those thunderstorms shift farther east. And what you end up with is a change in
so that was Phil Klotzbach talking us through the Colorado State hurricane forecast. We broke that down with Brooks. You can also find that full breakdown right now on fox35orlando.com and in the Fox Local app. We're going to take another break here on Fox 35 News Plus, but we will be right back after this.
watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
The state of Florida has 2 new Congress members in Washington, D.C., representing them, their districts in the U.S. House of Representatives. And no one is happier about that than House Speaker Mike Johnson, who now has a little bit larger of a Republican majority, thanks to new members, Congressmember Jimmy Patronis of Florida's 1st District and Randy Fine of Florida's 6th District. Speaker Johnson swore in those 2 members of Congress yesterday evening.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter, so help you God?
I do.
Congratulations, you're now members of the 119th Congress.
So Jimmy Patronis and Randy Fine, both fresh off of roughly 14-point wins in their districts. You saw them with Senators Rick Scott and Ashley Moody there. You also saw Mike Herodopoulos, Byron Donalds as well, a congressman who is running for governor here in Florida, and in fact just got the endorsement in that race from Speaker Mike Johnson. Now, moments after he was sworn in, new Congressman Jimmy Patronis did speak on the floor of the House of Representatives. He outlined some plans to support President Trump's agenda, and he also thanked his family.
Mr. Speaker, it's an honor here to be representing the men and women of Florida's 1st Congressional District. As a lifelong native of the Florida Panhandle, I'm ready to get to work to support President Trump's agenda to make America first, to protect our southern border, to make groceries affordable, strengthen our military, and provide much-needed support to our veterans. Without my family, I wouldn't be here today. So I'd like to give special thank you to my beautiful wife, Katie, my boys, Johnny and Theo, and all of the great friends and supporters who made the trip to our nation's capital. Mr. Speaker, with a Republican majority here in Congress, President Trump and the White House, we've got the opportunity of a lifetime to fix this country so our children grow up in a nation that's safe and full of opportunities. So I'm ready to get our fiscal house in order. As a former chief financial officer for the state of Florida, I oversaw the state's budget for nearly a decade. I know what it takes to make sure we have a growing economy with a stabilized budget. I've always believed that people in America spend their money better than Washington, D.C. does. In fact, I can't believe the greatness that we're saddling our children with an unbearable amounts of debt. And the President's efforts to root out fraud, waste, abuse, and is critical to restoring trust in our nation's government. For far too long, Americans have sent their hard-earned tax dollars to Washington without really feeling like they're getting anything for it. Frankly, Washington's been indifferent to the needs of families throughout this country, and we've got an opportunity to fix a lifetime of issues for the better. Like I've said, I'm a workhorse, not a show horse. I'm ready to get to work, my colleagues in this country, together to get this country out of the ditch and returning it to greatness. May God bless America.
So that was new Congressman Jimmy Patronis speaking last night, and then just moments after that, Congressman Randy Fine of Florida's 6th District gave his first address on the floor of the House. He also thanked his family, thanked his colleagues for supporting his campaign as well, and talked about the path to Congress.
35 years ago, a 16-year-old boy walked through those doors, and he marveled in this room at this temple of democracy as he watched people who gave of their lives, who gave up time with their families, who gave up their careers in order to serve their country. When I spent a year working here as a House page, I learned from so many people, 5 of whom, by the way, are still serving today, what it meant to serve America, what it meant to put the needs of the country before yourself. I want to recognize my family because when I did this opportunity, being a good Jewish boy, my family would not send me alone. My mother, my father, my sister, they moved to Washington. And my mom, who I'll talk about in a little bit, used to sit where Wendy, my father, I want to recognize them. Thank you so much for being here. My sons who are over there, but my mom used to sit up there and she used to watch me every day. And she used to tell me, Randy, that God has a plan. Now, I believe that when Donald Trump's life was saved in Butler, Pennsylvania, it was so that he could save the world. And it is an honor of a lifetime that God's plan for me is to come and help all of you implement that plan. But today is also a sad day for me, because the person I most wish could be here to watch this can't be here. I will tell you a story about my mom. She was my biggest champion. She was the one who taught me how to fight. And if you don't know me and if you haven't followed me, fighter will be the word that you know soon enough. But one day when I was 16 years old, my mother came with me. We went to the stationery store, which is still in the same place that it is today. And we went into that store, and my mom saw something that she thought that I should buy. She said, Randy, you never know when you might actually need this. Now, I bought that thing that day. I thought it was kind of crazy. And it's been sitting in my closet for 35 years. It's in that bag over there. It is a metal seal that says Member of Congress. And when I leave here and I go back to my office, it will be the first thing that I hang. Because God has a plan for us all. He has a plan for all of you. He has a plan for me. He has a plan for every member of my family. He has a plan for every person who is watching here today. And I believe that his plan in the days ahead is to do everything in our power to deliver on the promise that the voters asked us to do in November, and that is to make America great again. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
That was Congressman Randy Fine speaking last night on the floor of the U.S. House. Going to take one more break here on Fox 35 News Plus, so we will be right back. Keep it here on YouTube and on Fox Local.
You're watching Fox 35 News Plus, streaming on Fox Local.
Welcome back into Fox 35 News Plus. I want to get you to a story now that's getting a lot of attention across Florida, even though it's out of Florida's panhandle, but I want to make sure we cover it today. Walton County Deputy Will May died after being shot while responding to a trespassing call. This happened again in Walton County, and we heard from Sheriff Michael Atkinson yesterday giving an update on what happened.
2 p.m. this afternoon, Walton County Sheriff's Office Dispatch received a call from the Dollar General store, which is located at U.S. Highway 90 around Lancelot Road in the Mossy-Head community. That call was that there was an individual there causing a disturbance and needed to be trespassed from the scene. The deputy that was dispatched, Deputy Will May, responded to that call. Deputy May was not supposed to be working today. He came in to volunteer to provide overtime assistance. Deputy May responded to the Goodwill store, made contact with the suspect. There was a brief discussion, approximately 10 to 15 seconds, in which the suspect exited the store with Deputy May walking out behind him. Within 10 seconds of the suspect walking out of the store with Deputy May behind him, that suspect drew a firearm and fired multiple rounds, striking Deputy Will May. Deputy May, to his great personal credit and courage, was able to draw his firearm and return fire. This short but violent gunfight resulted in at least 18 rounds being fired, with both individuals being killed. The suspect died on scene. Deputy May called for assistance, announced that he had been shot and shots were fired. Another deputy from the Walton County Sheriff's Office responded on scene within approximately 2 minutes and began to attempt to render aid to Deputy May. Within another 30 seconds to a minute, 2 deputies and a trooper also arrived. One of our deputies, being an EMT, also began attempting to render aid to Deputy May. Walton County Fire Rescue immediately responded to the scene as well. That is an advanced life support unit. They also began working Deputy May. We attempted to airlift Deputy May from the scene, but air conditions would not allow that to work. Walton County Fire Rescue transported Deputy May to North Okaloosa Medical Center, where for the next 4 hours, surgeons and doctors worked to save Will May's life. Will fought the entire time, from returning fire on scene to fighting for his own life. At 7:10 this evening, Deputy Will May succumbed to gunshot. Will had been a member of this organization officially since around 2014. He started as a communication officer, and then later in 2019 became a deputy sheriff. So for the past 6 years, he's patrolled. He's been a field training officer since 2023. Let me tell you what that doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you that he's a second generation member of this organization. His father was a retired assistant fire chief. His mother's a former dispatcher. He chose a lifetime of service. I am struggling on behalf of this organization to make sense of this, because I can tell you there is absolutely nothing tactically wrong that Deputy May did. I've been in this business 32 years. There is nothing I would have done differently. There was no indication whatsoever that this would have ended in that kind of violence. But that's what the men and women of this organization, the men and women who choose to put themselves in harm's way, understand and accept when we go to work. Watching it, it is just unfathomable to me that Will is not here. It's unfathomable to me that this happened. But I can tell you, and I want to say again, there's absolutely nothing he could have done differently, nor was there any indication of this individual's capable of this level of violence. Deputy May was wearing a ballistic vest. That vest did stop multiple rounds from the suspect. One of the rounds went underneath the vest, which ultimately caused his death. I'm going to try and answer any questions that you have with the best of my ability. You will not hear me say the suspect's name. He does not deserve that. I will not give it to you. If you want it, you can get it off the report.
That's the Walton County Sheriff there in that news conference yesterday, last night rather, talking about the death of the Walton County Deputy Will May, shot and killed in the line of duty. Continuing to follow up on that as updates become available. Well, we appreciate you joining us here on Fox 35 News Plus this morning, live on YouTube and Fox Local. We hope you join us at 2 o'clock for Florida Live. Got a lot coming up in that show. We're going to break down the hurricane forecast with Fox 35 Storm Team meteorologist Laurel Blanchard. And then at 2:30 again, we will take live that news conference in Tavares where investigators, prosecutors supposed to give an update on that case against Kimberly Mills and Andre Walker, who are charged with murder in the death of a 10-year-old Xavier Williams after investigators say he had been tortured and it was in the hospital for weeks before dying. So we hope you join us at 2 o'clock for